Hello and welcome to class 4. Before we get started, as always, just a couple of reminders. Keep in mind that this is being recorded, so if you miss any of the content right now, you can always review it later on mace.com. And if you have any problems with Crowdcast during the stream, you can try clicking the green button below the screen and viewing on YouTube. So once again, thank you for your time. And here are Carolyn and Lynn. Enjoy the class.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to session 4 of Being Swallowed by the Dragon. We're going to talk about how to break through cycles of limitation and possession.
Right.
And this is a delicious topic because every single human being lives between, I think, the struggle of their limitations, feeling possessed by something, not realizing it's possession. But I love the way Lynn explains it, so I'm going to throw the ball over to you.
Okay, that's great. I'm going to thank you, Carolyn. One of the things that we're going to be talking about today is the fact that we've been talking a lot about this axis of the dragon and how it moves, how it's a cycle of oppositions that appears at certain moments in the year. Now, this cycle it empties us out and asks us to become conscious, but it can also pull us into wildly regressive behaviors. So first I'm going to talk about how we get knocked off center, and then what do we look for? What are we looking for to keep that from happening, to keep us from falling into these patterns where we're like, I recognize that. How did I just turn into that person I didn't like, whoever that person happens to be? Can you put up the first slide, please? Yeah, so this is what we're going to do today. When the archetypal network of power begins to shift, we experience resistance. And this is general, but because the North Node is in Taurus, which is probably the most resistant sign. Remember, we've talked about how it needs things to be a certain way. It's looking for habit and comfort and repetition. And when we don't go, so we go back to that comfort, and when it's not there, the voice of our fears starts speaking to us. And these impulses for control, to how do we stop this, repression, and if it's coming from someone else we don't like, we try to get them to stop, which is a form of domination. And these seem to be the solutions if we're working on a very instinctive and automatic level. So one of the, and they can halt the wheels of evolution. So these classic fear impulses always fail, as Carolyn says, because evolution and the shift to holism can't be stopped. So what we're experiencing now is the last gasp of this cycle of archaic thinking. Okay, well, we can make that smaller. And I'll pull it up again a little later. Can we take that away? Okay, so there are two really important dates in this cycle, because one of the things going on is there's a planet in the sky that's mediating the dragon, almost as if we have a harness on the dragon, or let's say a harness in one hand and a whip on the other. So depending on what you can make it worse, or you can hold it in. And that planet is called Saturn, which has been the technical expression for this is square the nodes. And Saturn is a planet that is much feared in astrology. In the ancient world, it was the outer limit of the world we lived in. And it was considered far away and difficult to know and almost impossible to mediate with once it came into action. Saturn has a 29-year cycle. And right now it's in the sign of Aquarius, which is square the nodal axis of Taurus and Scorpio. But Saturn works in two ways. In one, it stops us. It makes it harder. We come right up against whatever wall we're experiencing, in the sense of, why won't things move? Why can't they open? not again. So every time it opens, it shuts down again. It's part of the way this works. This is not common in interface with the nodal axis. It's an unusual pattern. And people who do work with um, the progress of the soul, let's say that a planet in this position is calling us to an incredibly important lesson. So how do we align with Saturn, which is the taskmaster, and which is not, which calls us to task for what we haven't done correctly, for the work we haven't done, for our neglect or laziness, or whatever it is, wherever we aren't living up to what we can do. This archetypal energy, you could see it as the taskmaster. You could see it as the conscience, or the voice of the conscience, or the critic who says, "Did you not do that? And now you will have to deal with this." So sometimes Saturn comes from outer circumstances, difficult things that we have to deal with and watch how we respond. And sometimes Saturn comes from within, and we are asked to rise to something, to find a quality, to hold a position, which isn't perhaps instinctive or our first choice, but to step into something that's really important. And I want to call your attention to 2 dates. Because one has already happened. It was in the beginning of April. So around between April 9th and April 11th, a lot was happening in the sky. And this was the moment where Saturn was exactly square the nodes. So it won't be exact again, but it's in the zone. It's in the zone until November, let's say. And so Saturn here is an opportunity to pull us back from the brink. Like when you start to feel anxiety, you're watching something happening and your heartbeat goes up, your pulse goes up. The other day, I ran into someone who was like, "Oh my God, I don't know what's going on. I have these flashing, I have to go to the emergency room." And it was from outside looking at this person, you could see that it had to do with anxiety or fear about something that was coming up, which was driving their spirit and their mind to be possessed by a difficult energy, almost, and they couldn't stop. They couldn't stop this process. It was almost like the tics and nervousness and shaking. And once they had gone to the emergency room and the authority said, "It's all fine," that all calmed down. So, of course, we can't afford to find someone to play out Saturn for us who says, "Everything's fine." Well, we can, because Carolyn's going to do that for us later. I'm just teasing. But we have a place where we're looking to find a third point, which has extreme clarity. The sign Saturn is in, sometimes Saturn is just about time. And you know when you're in it because you just have to go through it. It's the time that something will happen when something difficult is coming up for you. Okay, you gird yourself and you move through that task, whether it's dealing with an elderly parent or your bank account, or flipping out because your neighbors just bought a lot of guns, right? So you're trying to find, how do I hold my response? And a lot of people, when they feel something's happened to them, they lash out immediately at someone else. Well, if you had done that, this wouldn't have happened. So what happens when you do that? You're actually not only have you given your power away to a illusory cause, but you've also made that person responsible for something and pulled them into your anxiety and your process of blame and anxiety and taken them down to that place where you feel bad. They now have to feel bad with you. This is because the South Node is in Scorpio. This is where it tends to go. It tends to go into making the other person wrong, making them responsible for having done something that makes you feel bad. But of course, we know that doesn't happen. You do something that makes you feel bad. They don't do something that makes you feel bad. So this very subtle, it's like a banana peel or a snake skin, let's say, that you slip on. This very subtle slip goes there. Now, in April, this square to the nodes wasn't the only thing. There was also another very powerful cosmic energy, which we're going to talk about on the last day of this series, this reflection series, which is a combination of the visionary planets. And it came in, they came together, which they do every 13 years, just as Saturn was in this key position. It's like you've given Saturn the key to stop the slide into darkness in your own soul. And I'll be talking about it, but it's fascinating for me that Saturn holds a key just as something really big is being offered to us, to go with, let's say, the nightmare side of our imagination or the creative and hopeful side of our imagination. And when I talk about imagination, I'm talking about a soul quality. I'm not talking about just making things up and fantasy and just running with something. So Saturn holds a key to, again, that feeling. I was having a conversation with someone that was quite normal about something. Oh, it's too bad that happened, etc. And then, but that didn't happen because this other person did this. It suddenly went into that pattern of making it another person's fault. And it was fascinating to see how the energy shifted in the conversation from just mutuality into a kind of runaway circuit of blame and anger. Now, these are not the only emotions that happen. This is happening to one of the others, one of the least palatable of these emotions. And today I'm talking a little bit about the South Node. And so it's not so comfortable to talk about the South Node. And for those of you who are waiting for me to talk about Venus, we will talk about it at the end day when Carolyn and I come back on together. So this cycle of the South Node, one of the things is blame and anger, but another is envy. And it is, well, how come it's not working out for me, but everything's okay for her? And this kind of almost ill-wishing. There's this word that we've all gotten to know, Schadenfreude, which is a German word for the pleasure we take when something bad happens to someone who up until then had always been lucky. There's this kind of secret little pleasure that's recognized very specifically in that language. And the opposite of this quality, which is connected to the force of love, of course, is that we're delighted and thrilled when something good happens to somebody else. Okay. And this is a really good way to judge how you're feeling how you're dealing with these nodes. And one of the ways it's worked out on the public sphere is the whole Johnny Depp Amber Heard saga, which I did not watch personally. And it doesn't matter which side of this you're on, but it's a kind of, what you were seeing was an enactment of this wanting to show the shadow side, wanting everybody to see how dark and how bad the other person was, how destructive that other person was. They're the bad one. They're the one that did these terrible things. And that was like completely being in the tail of the dragon. And again, whatever came up in you around the tail of that dragon, whoever you sided with, okay, because you can justify either position, whoever you sided with in that, just be aware of how much you got, if you were paying attention to it, how much you got pulled into that maelstrom of that horrible person. Oh my God, he's clearly did this. Oh my God, she's clearly wrong. Whichever you were feeling, just notice how that was echoing something very archaic, very old, very ancient in your own process, that comes up and attaches itself to external things that are happening. And that seems pretty harmless, but in fact, it actually is stirring this stuff up in you. And I'm not saying you shouldn't watch the news. Like Carol and I are both kind of news junkies. We need to know what's alive in the world. We need to know the forces that are moving through the world. I need to know what is truly dangerous. Okay. And some of the same thing is going on. So Saturn, and particularly in an air sign, air is the ability to step back, to be objective, and particularly in Aquarius, it's the ability to detach from all the stories, from all the things, the stories that animated you and kept certain emotions running and repeating and claiming and losing your power. Saturn is the ability to step back and to hold, to in a way, get a point of view. Aquarius is always like getting a view where you see the sky, right? You see part of the big picture. And there is a moment where there's non-judgment in that. It isn't anybody's fault. It's not your partner's fault, your parents' fault. It is what it is. And how do we keep this from throwing us into the crazy place where we just have completely lost our footing? I had a friend tell me an incredible story the other day. She was, it was a very hot day, and she and her husband went to a nearby river, which didn't have much water in it. River was probably a bit of an exaggeration, but there was a place where the river came down from some mountains, and there was like a little waterfall. And she said she was in the water, it was really cool. And she put her hand, and she was stretched out and leaning back, and the waterfall was on her back. And she suddenly looked at her hand and she said, "Oh, that's a nice bracelet." And then she looked again and she went, "Ah!" It was a snake that had wrapped around her wrist, a silver snake, 4 times. She didn't, because she was in the water, apparently she didn't feel the snake wrap around her wrist. She said it was like a dream. Now remember, The nodes of the moon are like the snake, like like the dragon. They're parallel ways of talking about this experience. So being in the water, and the south node is in a water sign, being in the water, and suddenly when she first saw it, she had that very high objective place in herself, and she was in the Taurian place of immersion and well-being, the coolness of the water, the well-being of the thing. And then she saw the snake and she flung it off and into the water, and it was carried away by the stream. And they thought, well, that's that. It was really disconcerting. And then a few minutes later, they see the snake come swimming up the river, and it go with a fish in its mouth. And then they see the snake swallow the fish, open its mouth wider and wider, a pretty big fish. And they said it changed shape completely, and it was still swimming, and you could see the fish sort of going down. She's like, what was that? What happened to me? And you see in her reaction, she did two things. She moved out of pleasure into fear. Then she moved back into wonder, into questioning. I mean, she was shaking. It turned out to be an inoffensive snake, not a snake. It doesn't have any fangs. It wouldn't hurt you. And then she watched snakes do what they do with a kind of amazement, but she didn't take it personally. She didn't go into, oh my God, this means something's going to devour me. She just watched, and she's sitting with it thinking, what has been sent to me? What is the message of this? So she was able to pull herself right back out. This is somebody who meditates a lot and who prays a lot and who sings the names of the divine and has a practice. So she went into anxiety. She had wonder, anxiety, and she came right back out. And then she's sitting with, I don't know. Sometimes when we don't know, and we are in a period where it's very difficult to make sense of what's happening, we don't know where this is going to go. We don't know what's happening. We don't know how certain things will play out. It is very, very difficult not to get caught into a need to feel, if we're feeling powerless from outer events, which I can't imagine with environmental change and war and the possibility of a fascist takeover of America. I can't imagine that we're not feeling anxious. So if you begin to, that anxiety and that fear can lead to powerlessness. And one of the ways to stop this pattern, and some of us respond to powerlessness by yelling at the bus driver or aggressing somebody in a supermarket, or some person calls us to sell us something on the phone, and instead of being human, we snap their head off. So some of it is this ability, again, to step back and to see, this is what the square between Aquarius and Scorpio in particular is about. This powerful, pulsating. Scorpio also has a very positive function. It is the power of the instincts in a situation at a moment when you need them. It's the awakening of passion that restarts the life force. It's something that runs through us, that keeps us from ever giving up or ever stopping. There are incredible sides to this. But the square between the two sides is almost like being able to experience and then very quickly have a double point of view to know that you're experiencing this and you're seeing yourself experiencing it simultaneously, as if you are calling up a kind of more conscious self. And then when you do that, so for my friend who was in the water with her snake around the wrist, she she didn't go back to her comfort zone, because that is not the goal. The goal is not to stay in our comfort zone, because these forces are moving through our lives to wake up something. For her, it threw her into another place, which was wonder and the reflection of what kind of message has just been sent to me about the nature of things. It stunned me, that story. So working now, Saturn is not only positive. As I said, Saturn is very often an energy of hyper control that wants to shut down, wants to not just step back and have distance from uncomfortable feelings in the self, but wants to control everybody else's feelings around them, and sort of saying, you're not supposed to feel that way. Basically give instructions to the group about what it is okay to feel or not feel. And there is a lot of that also going on in the world. A lot of if I don't address your uncomfortable feeling exactly the way you want me to, you might attack my authority, right? So where is that coming from? Because Saturn, in its most positive side, is a planet of authority. When it is conscious, it's the ability to listen to personal authority and to say, yes, I see that. I saw where I went there, and this is where I'm going to be now. So this whole, so one of the things that we might do is actually, in a way, it's like if you feel feelings of powerlessness, you want to make the other person powerless as well. You may experience your powerless as their, due to their action. But again, and therefore you attack their perceived power, whatever that happens to be. You may feel fear. Certain parts of the US in particular, people are afraid of certain segments of society. And so they're going to buy arms to make sure they're protected against that segment of society. And then the other side is afraid of them because they have arms. And this is how the whole thing escalates. So there's like this place where the cool head, the cool perspective, the step back is necessary. Now, can we look at that first slide again, please? So, what does it mean to be possessed by fears? Okay, we've talked about, I've given you two examples of that. A woman who externally needed an external authority to keep her from flipping out. But what about this? The fear of becoming a conscious and empowered human being. Okay. As long as we hold this position that it's happening to me, this is being done to me, and someone else has to change so I don't feel this way. We're avoiding our conscious empowerment. We're avoiding being an adult human being. can we stop the cycles in the heavens? Well, in a way, we can. But in a way, what we can do is, as I'm describing to you with Saturn, is hold when Saturn is square the nodes, instead of going, like, wow, flipping into the vortex, that Saturn does sort of stop. That's what I mean when I talk about the key. Now, Saturn isn't exactly there, but it's within a few degrees. It gets as close as under 2 degrees or something during the summer with the nodes. So this force, this ability of being able to identify the process you're in. Well, I recently came back from the States, and I spent a few days after a conference with a very dear friend of mine. And the day I left, he was diagnosed with COVID. And so I had that moment when I got the email of all the hairs standing on my body, right? Going into planning for the emergency. Again, this is Scorpio. Scorpio is the emergency response, the throwing you completely out of balance. And I had plans to see quite a few people, etc. And I was able to say, okay, where's my test? And I took the test, negative, and they said, okay, we'll wait a few days and contact, I'll test again, and then we'll see if I can do all these things that I was supposed to be doing the next few weeks. And in fact, it turned out to be fine. And on an inner level, I knew it was fine. That's what I want to say. On an inner level, every fiber of my being, and maybe I could have been wrong, but I had this feeling that I was okay. I'd just gotten off a plane. Anything could have happened. But there was this feeling, it's going to be fine. And it was that, it wasn't like I was just making it up. It was a very deep inner resonance of checking in and not allowing that cycle to destabilize me for more than a short period of time, like my friend with the snake. So stepping outside, again, and that's the third point, which is say, okay, what's the strategy? Maybe you do have COVID. What's the strategy? What do you do in the meantime? How do you deal with it? How long till the next test, etc. So one of those, this is an empowering choice. So it's not stopping the cycle of the heavens, but it's cooperating with the cycles of the heavens. It's kind of knowing that they're there, knowing that the swampy place, that kind of mucky, stirred up emotional water that there are for some of us. Some of you have posted in the Reflections group on Facebook for spiritual guidance. And some people have said that this was really helpful in identifying things that they've been going through, like major emotional things, betrayals, being bereft, being abandoned, being stirred up, and just in that state of shock. Well, what I have to do now is find solid ground for myself, because that is what we are all called to do, is to refine the stable place within ourself. So again, can we stop the cycles in the heaven? No, but our goal is actually to move, is to actually learn to move with them, to dance with them, and when you find yourself suddenly going in that place, because all of us, sometimes you just wake up and you're off. You're off, and you snap at the people around you, and you break things, and you drop things. It's not the day. It's not your day. Don't make a major decision in that state. Come back, come back. That is any astrological cycle is requiring consciousness. So there are two clues. One is the big picture that's coming from Saturn and the ability to stop, to put a punctuation on something quite quickly. And the other clue comes from that place of solid ground and well-being that's provided by Taurus. Now, on the other hand, I don't know about you, but I remember many, many years ago, I had really terrible vision most of my life. And thanks to cataract surgery, I don't wear glasses most of the time. But, believe me, I could not see. And I remember I was really quite young the first time an eye doctor said, "Oh, you have the beginning of cataracts." And so I immediately went out and what did I do? I went shopping and I bought myself an unusually, for me, expensive cashmere sweater, which I still have. This is like 25 years ago. That's how long this was. And I recognized that my other solution to anxiety and bad news was to buy myself something. So this is possession. This is an experience of, we go into a desire to possess something. You could say the possession by our fear makes us open our wallet. So it doesn't, not everybody, that's going in the Taurus direction of the nodal axis. It's give me something that will make me feel good. I've never, ever regretted that. And I'm sure many of you have examples of the same thing, but it's when we do it all the time, or it's an unconscious pattern. Let me just go buy myself some cherries. Whatever it happens, let me just go eat a bag of potato chips. Sorry, I don't want to induce these experiences. We can take that away again, please. So one of the other dates you saw up there on that slide was October 30th. And I want to talk about that date because in astrology, there's always a dialogue between the planets. This dialogue, certain planets they have dominion in certain places, in certain signs. So Saturn, one of the signs where Saturn is comfortable is Aquarius. That's one of the reasons we can use it so positively at the moment. The sign of Scorpio resonates. It has dominion is given to Pluto and to Mars. And when things happen with those planets, our relationship with anything in that sign will suddenly wobble or change. Now, Pluto is very, as we talked about yesterday, it's extremely slow moving, and it's been in Capricorn for many years. And that's why we've been in these patterns of almost hyper control, giving our authority, giving our own personal power and personal authority away to the heads of corporations, some of whom we know and some of whom we don't know. And why some of us are totally paranoid about certain people in the world thinking that they want to control every aspect of our lives. And you know who I'm talking about. And maybe they do. But there is, again, a fantasy of conspiracy thinking with Pluto in Capricorn, which has been going on a much longer time than since the dragons have been in these signs, where in fact we see the power to destroy our worlds in the hands of these several individuals, and we project everything onto them. They are going to plant us with microchips, or they're planning to undo everything, or they've got total control over everything that's happening to us. this is another way of getting caught in the dragon. It's much less personal than the ways I've been talking about. It's way out there, but it's even more powerful because it's so much further out of our control. And we become caught in a state of paranoia about what's being done to all of us. So again, Saturn in Aquarius, it's not that none of that there are bad things happening. Okay. It's really important. That's what we were talking about in the first session. There are bad things happening, but we need to go back to this place of big picture. Calm it down. Take that jerk on the chain emotional response out of there. Can we see the next slide, please? Okay. This is Marcus Aurelius, who was a Roman emperor and philosopher who wrote a book called The Meditations in the 2nd century. And he was a Stoic. And he says, if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. And this you have the power to revoke at any moment. I love that. If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. And you have the power to revoke that idea at any moment. You have the power to claim back what you have given to that external thing. And Marcus Aurelius lived at a time which was pretty brutal. There was a plague that he himself had many physical ailments. He dealt with a lot of physical suffering. He wasn't particularly healthy, but he would go out in the field and he would camp in a tent with his soldiers and go without refinement. He felt that the more you actually experience something directly, the more you had the truth of it. And this is very much a Saturn and Aquarius philosophy. We don't actually know his birth date, but he has this feeling of a kind of a toughness of appealing to reality. And during the time he was emperor, there was a plague called the Antonine Plague, and about 5 million people died. I mean, a huge number of people of a plague that we don't know exactly what it was. Maybe smallpox. Maybe the measles when they first appeared. So we can take that away, please. But I want to go back to this date of October 30th, and we'll talk more about this tomorrow, because that time of the year, late October to mid-November, is so charged that it's everyone in the astrological community has their eyes wide open looking at it. But the first thing that happens, and what I want to talk to you about today, is that on the 30th of October, the day before Halloween, Mars goes retrograde. And again, Mars having dominion, one of the planets having dominion over Scorpio, where the tail of the dragon is, where the tail of the serpent is, suddenly is like receiving a huge wobble. It's almost, now, I just want to qualify that a planet retrograde means that if we were looking at the sky and we watch the movements of the planets against the fixed stars, so that's something that David can do because he's in Arizona where the skies are perpetually clear, and some of you, I hope, can do that, you would suddenly see that the planet Mars was no longer moving forward, but slipping backwards day by day. goes stationary and goes backwards. So this indicates some kind of shift, and it could indicate a regression or a return to behaviors that when this happens, Mars will be in the sign of Gemini, where it splits. It splits in two. And so this process of splitting, or this process of sundering, doesn't exactly help with stepping back and staying calm and distant and controlled. It's as if there is a huge amount of turmoil or a tempest that becomes possible, not just because of this, but because of other things as well. And one of the things we say also is this moment when Mars stops in the sky. It's almost like you take a magnifying glass to the planet, and it has more power at that moment because it's stationary. Just like 2 days ago, the sun stood still on the solstice. So the sun had immense power. It's the sun's high day. This is a little different because the planet going backwards is almost being discombobulated for the moment. So we are all going to need to watch ourselves in terms of this process with the tail of the dragon around that time. It can very easily be superpowered by this passage and the fact that there are eclipses that happen right after. So one of the things we're working with is whatever balance you find, you can be pretty sure that you're going to lose it sooner or later. Can we put up the next slide, please? Can we make that a little bigger? Or, oh, that's big enough. So it's a strange image, isn't it? The eyes in the heart. And there's a quote here from Ephesians, from St. Paul. You must have the eyes of your hearts enlightened, that you may know. Because it isn't enough to just take distance and to go away and to stop the movement. That is wonderful. That is incredibly helpful. That Saturnian process of clarity. You chill. You literally chill when everything is roiled and in turmoil. But that isn't enough. It's wonderful. It's a great gift. But to open the eye of the heart, you must have the eyes of your heart enlightened. Enlightened. Wow. And we've been talking a lot about the heart, and we've been connecting it to Venus. And of course, it does connect to Venus on one level, but in the astrological body, the heart is ruled by Leo, the sign opposite Aquarius. And it's the ability to be fully present and wholehearted. Because if your heart is enlightened, if the eyes of your heart are enlightened, how can you blame the other person? If the eyes of your heart are open, how can you see that person with anything but their full majesty? Even if that full majesty isn't always there. That's the other way, the other sign that is square, that is balancing or squaring the tail of the dragon and the head of the dragon, the dragon's can be held by Leo. So the summer, when the sun goes into Leo, and particularly in about the 4th or 5th of July, the sun is actually square. The sun, every planet has a negative potential, okay? So even though I'm saying the sun is the light, it is the light that allows our eyes to see, but it is also the light that allows our heart to see. The sun can also just be, look at me, I'm bright and shiny, I want attention, I want you to see who I am. It can also be in service to our narcissism, in service to our ego, in service to our neediness. It's we who create the right relationship with it. And the cycles of the planets are invitations and opportunities for us to do that. When I was, I've been invited to China a couple of times to teach astrology, and it's always been an extraordinary experience for me. And but the first time I went, I decided that I would try to learn. I've given this up now, by the way, but I decided I would try to learn some basic Chinese vocabulary. And one of the things I learned is that the word shi, which means basically teacher in China, Lao Shi, shi, which means to know, is the same word for the heart. And it was because I was learning some of the ideograms. And this idea that we truly know with the heart is absolutely fundamental, not just to ancient Chinese philosophy, which is called the heart mind, but in every word in Chinese that's about knowing, whether it's psychology or teaching or wisdom, you have the same word, shi, heart. Heart and knowing, heart and mind are the same in the language. Now, it may not be that way in ordinary reality, but it was a kind of a shock for me. And this was also true in the older aspects of the English language and Anglo-Saxon, that the mood, that there is something about knowing with the heart, not just with the head. And remember, this is what Carolyn was telling us on the very first day about this split, Papa Bear and Mama Bear, this split into heart and mind, that addiction is the result of the separation between the heart and the mind. So how do we tame the dragon? How do we stop the cycle? How do we stop the cycle of possession, of getting ourselves possessed? We step back and we see the big picture, but more fundamentally, we see with the eyes of the heart enlightened, that we may know. Can we see the next slide? Well, let's skip to the next one. I'm not going to talk about that today. I put it in twice. Oh, there was another. Can we take that away for the moment, please? Okay, so there was another quote that I thought I put on a page, but I don't see it. It's probably somewhere else. Oh yeah, it's probably at the end. Which is the philosopher Pascal, the French philosopher. And he said, le cœur a ses raisons que la raison ne connaît point. And that means the heart has its reasons that reason barely knows. There it is. The heart has its reasons of which reason knows nothing. Another translation. So sometimes we need to, when we're in heart and the tail of the dragon, what we do or what we're moved to do on an almost instinctive and automatic level when we're moving from the heart, it may not make sense to our rational mind. That's the part of us, that's where Saturn is, and Saturn is stepping out. So if the rational mind starts to run its loops and says, well, wait a minute, why would you do that? And this person had this thing, and wouldn't it be better to? No, there are certain times where the power needs to move to the heart, to what is opening in you to another person, and you don't know why that is. What makes you one day go out on the street and in my neighborhood, there's well, especially last year, I think they've moved now, but in my neighborhood, go out on the street and talk to the homeless woman who has a tent and is in front of one of the banks, and who's been there for many months, and bring something to her and have a conversation with her. What moves your heart on that day? To step out and actually make contact with someone who is not living an easy life, not living a comfortable life. Many of us, again, in the negative part of the cycle, we soothe ourselves by buying something or eating something or taking more for ourselves. And the eyes of the heart have incredible generosity. They're not just cool and detached, they're generous. So at certain moments when we're frightened, rather than self-soothing through shopping or eating or sex, or music, or wonderful things that give us true delight, sometimes the cure is just nameless generosity. It is this unreasonable generosity, this willingness to reach out to another person who you know is not doing okay, whether that's someone close to you. And sometimes we want to make that part of the world invisible to us. So it's in human nature sometimes to make it invisible, to not to see. But when you open the eyes of the heart, what opens in you? What pulls you? You are not possessed, but you are gifted. You are empowered. What I've been talking about today, for those of you who know a little bit of the astrological system, are the four signs of the four fixed signs: Taurus, Scorpio, where we've been talking about the presence of the dragon, and Leo and Aquarius. And for those of you who have a Catholic or Christian upbringing, you'll be familiar with these signs through the symbols of the four writers of the Gospels: the eagle, the angel, the bull, the lion. And sometimes Scorpio is the eagle, not the snake, not the dragon, not the serpent. It's not the scorpion, it's also the eagle on another level, that ability, that piercing vision of what darkness might be there, and the ability to seize it in a moment and to lift it up. So we're talking about this relationship between clear-sightedness and um, an enlightened heart. And this is how we break the cycle of fear, the cycle of regression, the cycle of possession. This is how we step out of our, yeah, if your heart has eyes that are enlightened, that are filled with light, how can it make the choice for power and domination over the other? Is that possible? The power represented by Scorpio then becomes an ability to transform, to take away from what is dead and dying and corrupted, and to bring and to move that up with the wings of the eagle. That generosity of heart and the solid place within yourself, the ability to step back and see without judging, and the willingness to see the darkness in your own soul and to step into your heart. This is the way you break this cycle. Carolyn, are you there?
Yes, I am right here, right here. Lovely. I feel like I speak 500 times faster than you. So, I mean, there's a slowness, but when you were talking, what occurred to me, several things occurred to me. But when you talk about, the influence of the gargantuan planets upon us as individuals, I think that is such a difficult concept for everybody to get wrapped around. And it's like, and I know in my area of theology, it's like trying to explain the influence of grace. You're trying to convince someone that grace is a mystical force and it moves through your life in ways that you can't identify, and yet things happen because of grace. And so it's the same kind of challenge as trying to explain how grace works, which I've been asked a million billion times. And but in listening, as I fill myself with wonder about how is it that a conjunction in the sky can affect all of us, but it does. And it affects all of us in various ways, depending on where Saturn is in our personal charts to the great Saturn. So it's macro and micro.
Right.
And I think what's important to understand and to really emphasize to people that within the mystical laws is your understanding of how this works. Because even Jesus, even Buddha, even the great teachers always said, look, what's in one is in the whole, as above, so below. This whole system breathes together. So that if you understand the nature of what a Saturnial movement is, that it restructures, it's going to restructure for everyone. But when you look at your chart, it tells you specifically in your personal life where you're going to feel that. You're going to feel it most in your second house or your third or wherever it is. But how it individuates just blows me out of the water, but not really. If you thought of all humanity as tiny little quantum molecules of one body, of one physical body, and so you have billions of molecules and atoms and all of this in one body. You have the population of the world in your body in microchips. Oh God, ignore that. In microchips. You've got the population of the world in your body like that. It's really not difficult to conceive that, and I'm sorry about that, guys. I should have unplugged the phone, but nobody even calls on the home line anymore. It's difficult to conceive that of how anything could influence the whole of everything unless you shrink it down to something you can actually relate to, which is if one tiny cell in this whole body became malignant, everything would shift in the whole body. It just takes one cell, one tiny cell. If you knew how tiny that cell was, it would be quite extraordinary to think, how is it that that little thing could bring down this big thing? So part of our challenge is that we still think in time, space, distance, which is, to go back to a word that you introduced, an illusion. It's a possession. And we are actually possessed by illusions that prevent us from actually seeing how intimate this impersonal universe really is. And that every one of and here's another thing that occurred to me, which is that, pardon?
I love that.
If as I listen to you teach, which I love to do, and learn more about the way in which the planets shift us, and then we shift in return. It's really a statement of organic divinity about how all of nature, even the planetary system, even the flow of the dragon, even the way when the tail of the dragon knocks something down in Taurus, and then it will shift to another alignment between two signs, and it will do it all over again.
Yeah.
The nodes will move, and they'll do it. It will just continue to do it. So the dragon dances around the complete astrological cycle, the chart. It is always doing the polar opposite. It's always, now I'm going to knock down in Cancer. And what's opposite Cancer, Lynn? Capricorn. So I'm going to knock down Cancer, but I'm going to chew up. I'm going to do something in Capricorn. I'm going to balance these. It's always balancing. And it's always, if you really understand the system as impersonally but intimately as you can, you realize this whole system organically, the way God moves and has designed life, is to constantly expand our understanding of how we are all intimately connected, how we all move together, how we all breathe together, how every single aspect that is shooting off in the heavens is actually in some way shooting off in our lives. And we can't comprehend it because we don't have the width, the breadth, the scope. It's impossible for us to comprehend it. And yet it's so. And that this is the organic nature of the divine. It is in all things and everywhere. And it wasn't until Teresa of Avila in her teaching that really completely redid my interior. The teaching, look for God in the small details. And I remember the first time I read that, and I thought the small details, and suddenly life, everything in life became a God detail, not a small detail, a God detail. Everything. Just like the beautiful example you used of the woman who has a snake. By the way, I would have... You know how I feel about snakes, but if I suddenly said, look at the bracelet that's a snake, do you know what would happen to me? I would have, honest to God, gone to my next incarnation. Left the earth. I would have said, that's it, I'm out of here. I am so out of here. But nevertheless, exactly that. She stepped into what a wondrous universe. And come over here to Francis of Assisi. I have a bird bath in my backyard. And every summer when I plant my garden and I get everything going and I get the water back in the bird bath and all the birds come and the squirrels come and everything comes to drink out of the bird bath. I'm always reminded rather, of Francis of Assisi, because he's always pictured around bird baths and the birds on his arm and that he talked to nature. And even last night, as I went into my prayers, I thought about Francis. And I thought about, well, of course, you would have this mystical relationship with all life. Because as you saw God in the small details, as you get away from the illusion that you need to be separate from everything to be safe, and it's that which is an illusion that is possessing human beings.
Yeah.
In order for me to be safe, I have to be separate. I have to go find separate places to live, separate this, separate that, separate gun laws, separate this. Separation protects us, when in fact, it's the absence of fear of the other that is our passage to a different stage of consciousness. At any rate, I marvel that the more we dispel these illusions, the more we actually really do see the universe as this benevolent force that is constantly moving life toward waking up and seeing things clearly. And honestly, Lynn, there are times when, in talking to people, when I did this presentation yesterday to doctors and therapists and people in the seminary. And I said, I don't have much to offer now at this stage in my life, except the experiences that I have learned from nearly 40 years of working with human beings. And whereas I used to when I started work as a medical intuitive, a profession I never even heard of how many years ago, in my 30s, early 30s. Now, I believed that in the simple mathematics of life, one stress equals one illness. Through the years, that illusion just disintegrated, because there's no such thing as one cause and one consequence. There's no such thing as one choice and one consequence. There's no such thing. And when I got into the mathematics of no such thing, I realized I couldn't do readings for people anymore, because if they lived in the illusion, the Saturnian illusion, really, mind that life has to be rational and controllable for me to endure it. Otherwise, I need guns to protect myself. I have to live in certain places. I have to be certain, because it's very Saturnian to think you can control all of this by what you do, by what you wear, by where you live, there is no control. That is this outrageous illusion. But the greater truth is that wherever I am, I'm like Marcus Aurelius. I'll give no power to anything. I'll give no quarter to any illusion. I won't. That's the way you play the game here. That's the way you do it.
Yeah.
You employ the force of Saturn to control your rational mind so that it doesn't become irrational and possess you.
That's right. That's exactly it. I think that we promised to talk about some Venus.
I'm sorry, John. Finish your Venus, and I bow out because I can't help you there.
Yeah, and I also have a quote I wanted to go back to, but that you would like. So you can ask me a question.
No. I'm just responding to your great teachings. I mean,
I love it, but I just sort of don't want people to.
You have to finish the place how Venus.
There's only three we need to talk about, actually, because we talked to, or four actually. An important one is Venus in Scorpio, and this is for everybody actually, because the dragon's tail is in Scorpio right now. But Venus in Scorpio has a bad reputation, or rather, it has a sulfurous.
What word?
a sulfurous reputation, right? Because it's attracted to the things you shouldn't be attracted to. It's drawn. And now, why Venus in Scorpio, it's attracted to strong emotions, the strongest feelings. Whatever it is, it has to be more of hotter, more difficult, more intense, more passionate. And the gift, the gift, I mean, this can get you into a lot of trouble, Venus and Scorpio, right? It can get you into trouble because it's almost like you choose the most difficult person, or in France, there's an expression, the beau ténébreux, which means the handsome dark stranger on the corner of the room. The Venus in Scorpio is a beeline to that, and you have no idea what fate, what trouble, difficult choice you might be making, because on some level, in order to know love, you want to test yourself and feel every possible difficult emotion and not lose the ability to love. So the gift of Venus in Scorpio is to see deeply into the darkness without fear and to still know love. And in some ways, that is what we're all asked to do right now. And so it's really important to talk that, to see deeply into the darkness without fear and to not lose the ability to love. Venus in Sagittarius loves everything, loves knowledge, loves experience, loves anything that it doesn't know about. So it just goes all over the place. But what it really wants is to know, in the desire to know everything, it wants to know God. It wants to know the divine. It's shooting its arrows all over the place, falling in love a million times. But what it really wants is to know, to know. So the power of Venus in Sagittarius is to know when it's touched the divine. That's a gift. And Venus in Aquarius.
Did you forget Capricorn?
Well, we talked about Capricorn a million times. That's yours, remember?
I was just following the chart. I was just going right.
We talked about it twice.
Right.
We talked about you, remember?
No, right. I'm sorry. Pardon me.
Again, but but we talked about that Venus in Capricorn loves the architecture of cosmic law. So some Venus in Capricorn, they just want to wear Armani, like they want to get it right. They're attracted to the law of the world, what the world says is, so all those people wearing, things that say Gucci and Dior, that might be Venus in Capricorn, but really that's not what Venus in Capricorn is about. It's about what's the right thing. How do you get it right? How do you do it?
Oh my God, that's so me.
Yeah, and you've lived through these different stages as well. Venus in Aquarius likes what's weird, like never been seen before, likes the offbeat and the unusual and the quirky and the kooky. It likes what is anything that isn't like what it grew up with, basically, and wants to be friends with all of it. It's like the weird kid in school. Venus in Aquarius is attracted to what's different because it knows that what's different is what we can be and where we're becoming. It knows that we haven't seen it all and that the human potential is always larger. And that's a gift. There's more to say about that, but I think that, because we'll be talking about Aquarius more in this series. And Venus in Pisces, wow, they're hopeless romantics that fall in love with your sadness, your suffering, your difficulty. They will, if in school, they'll be the one that falls off in love. Their best friend will be the kid who ends up having some tragedy in their life. They have an instinct for suffering and for drama. We say that Venus is exalted, so you have to know that their lives are very complicated and dramatic sometimes. They will fall in love with the ex-con, the person who's fallen on hard times, and they're drawn to save them with their love. And does that work well? Not always. If you've gone to the opera, you've met every Venus in Pisces on the planet. Venus in Pisces loves those people that other people are like, whoa, why would you go near them? Because they know that love is love, that we're all connected. There is no difference. That's Venus in Pisces. They have the gift to recognize love wherever it is.
Do you know what's delicious in listening to this? And it occurs to me because love to me is the word that we give to what God feels like.
Yeah.
So at the personal level, it's like the toilet water version of God.
Right.
That's personal love and personal, and I love this person, I love this, and I love this, and I love my dog. But that's baby love and sticky, manipulative, huh?
I love your dress.
Yeah, right, exactly. And then there's cologne. So you go from toilet water to cologne to perfume. And then love becomes, you start to realize that love actually is a most extraordinary force. It's not just love, it regenerates life. And that's when you go into the crisis zone, when you realize that you become conscious of, this is really the life force. This is actually more than love. This is, if I turn it off, I cause someone to suffer.
Right.
I actually torment them. If I turn off my light, I cause them to suffer. If I turn it on, watch this. It's like watering a plant in the desert, that you start, and then finally you get to love as perfume, which is love without a target. It's just the experience of God's light, and which is that level of mysticism, impersonal. And when I listen to you describe Venus as we go around the charts, you realize it's almost as if human beings have been assigned an angle of God. You get to experience the God is law, and look at me, that it drives me. It drives me. The order of God. What are your rules? What are your laws? And da 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 da. And I have a love affair with this. It doesn't even make any sense to people. It doesn't make sense to me. But then there are other people who are assigned to love that which can't be loved by other people.
That's right.
Then there are other people who are assigned to go discover the undiscoverable and follow their wackiness. And everybody's got their Venetian assignments. And it's just extraordinarily delicious to see how that all plays together in this one huge unity of what it is to be a human being.
And remember, one of the reasons we were talking about Venus is because it is connected to Taurus, where the head of the dragon is, and where our ability to become conscious, not just of what gives us pleasure, because that's Venus too. That's as you say, the baby level of Venus.
Yeah.
But to see what our assignment, as you say, our assignment of which angle of God, which angle of the divine we are bringing our love through. Mm-hmm. And when we know that, then that process of consciousness that comes with the appearance of the dragon, mm-hmm. is reinforced.
Precise. You know what to do when the dragon erupts.
That's right.
You know what to do. You think, I'm having a dragon experience. If I could speak about that for a moment, as I watch the hearings, the Senate hearings, everything I love this country, everything for me, it's very Venus for me, because I was brought up by a Marine. I adore this country. and everything it stands for. So when I watch these people break the laws for personal gain, for any reason, but for personal gain, and then to abuse
Mm.
and then the fallout from this, I can hardly control myself. I think, why would someone be so selfish as to risk the well-being of this nation and all that it means to this world? And I have to pray my way through my rage and get to a point where it's like the head and tail of the dragon, where I have to trust that there's something bigger going on, of which I know nothing, which is always the case. And I take refuge in my ignorance, in my holy ignorance. Can you believe that? I take refuge in my faith and my holy ignorance, in which I just say, deal with this. But I deal with this because I'm getting shattered here. But it helps me to understand my own Venus energy, to deal with a polarity when it is the earth, the Taurus earth, and the Scorpio secrets and the darkness that is coming out in this time.
Yeah.
Because that's what nodes are. During this healing, it is the darkness and the secrets and all the yuck of the Scorpion, the worst of the Scorpion dynamics, spies and secrets and lies, and how it's disrupting the Taurus earth, what we have built our lives upon.
Yeah. The great theft of honor, of truth, of all of those things. Right. There's another quote of Marcus Aurelius I'd just like us to have a really quick look at, or maybe there it is. Here it is. 2 other clues. The things you think about determine the quality of your mind. Your soul takes on the color of your thoughts.
Isn't that delicious? Didn't you write it? I mean, there's a reason his stuff is immortal.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, and that the quality of your mind, your soul takes on the color of your thoughts.
The color of your thoughts. Is that not delicious?
I knew you'd like that. And then he says, when force of circumstance, it's exactly what you were just talking about, upsets your equanimity, lose no time recovering your self-control, and do not remain out of tune longer than you can help. Habitual recurrence of the harmony will increase your mastery of it.
Indeed. Yeah, I have his book on my desk.
I've
treated Marcus Aurelius for years and years. But see, this to me is when
get that away now, right?
I'm sorry, what, darling?
Should we take the quote away or just?
Oh, it's so delicious. I mean, I think this is how we practice consciousness, and we'll shut down our class with this. This is how we practice consciousness. When you know, and it's not unlike I tell people in classes on healing, pay attention to when you're losing your center. Another way to say when you're hemorrhaging your power, because you have just, in the language of Teresa of Avila, a reptile's gotten into you. And with the Marcus Aurelius, the shades of color are shifting in your mind. And you have to go back to pure thought. You have to go back to what is clean. And what I tell myself is, the things happening in this moment are not happening in eternity. They're just happening in this moment. I got to turn this moment off. This moment's driving me absolutely crazy. I've got to get to the eternal space and out of this moment. And that helps me. It helps me. It just helps me move on. I make choices to employ the skill of my soul. And it is very conscious.
Yeah. And that is, that Aquarius, where Saturn is, the Aquarius point, which is the water. When you say, I want to get clean, that's the water bearer.
Yeah.
Just the purifying energy of the pure mind.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. And we'll see you for class 5 next.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.